One of the things I'm really going to focus on as I kind of go into this is really on the best practices and standards. And it was nice that you know, Phil Sexton being on yesterday, he was very much involved in the development of SIMA's best practices and standards. And I kind of look at this as like this wasn't developed just by one person. It's not just me or Phil or someone else. It was a group of people from a diverse audience that kind of developed a wider range of standards and best practices that we have that cover different topics. But I'm going to focus again from just on snow and ice melt on salt application and where that comes in these best practices. So with that, you always ask the question is like you're doing an assessment of what's in the industry. And so you have to take a look at the question of what is out there. What are some of the standards and best practices? And I'm certainly also not saying that SIMA has all of them. As Allison, this program even this week has referenced a lot of other entities are doing great things on how snow and ice melt products work and chlorides work. And there's just a ton of resources out there, but I will say, SIMA, resources, and I'll show a web link in a bit. They're free. I think one of the things, the mission that we have is that standards really become into player participation when people utilize them. So we wanted to make those, free and accessible to anyone that wants to download them. So, with that, I kind of take a look. Here's a site of like our resources, SIMA.org download. And first, I kind of talk about our overall company best practices checklist, and there's over 35 points on there that a company should be aware of on their winter maintenance practices, and that they should comply with or do their best to comply with. And I did a screenshot of this and I had to zoom it, make it much bigger. That's why it's a little bit blurry. But I just kind of cut out the section of this that talked about environmental management. So what are they for best practices in environmental management? You should follow your local regulations. You should also implement several sections of the sustainable salt use best practice, which I'll show in just a minute. And then also just be aware of the deicing material, proper application rates and storage, and how that impacts fresh water. Again, that's some of the same points that were discussed yesterday. You should practice these in action, see what works best, and try to make continuous improvements on those. So again, those that initial checklist referenced our sustainable salt use guidelines, and I'm just going to go into just a sample of the policies and processes that are in that document. There's multiple pages. It's not overwhelming. It's about an 8-page document. And I just encourage everyone that if you're interested to go and download those. I did notice, Allison as well too, a thank you that there was an email that you sent out this morning to remind attendees that were registered that they could download those too. So there's a download link for those in that email as well too. But when we take a look at the standard, it's what it is. It identifies different policies that you have and then processes and then how they kind of work together. So just a common one that you should have is you should have a defined plan to ice watch monitoring on sites and focused on spot treating. So this kind of gets away from the concept of spread and forget. You shouldn't be doing that. It should be spreading, applying, and then taking a look at how effective that is. So what's a process that your company could do for that? A process that you could do is monthly or on some kind of a regular schedule. Take a look at your salt output and do some audits as to how and verify your estimates of how much that you applied. Were they accurate? How do they compare with the actual applied with the inventory that you have currently? Do that on a regular basis. On a regular basis, the process we have here is to do it on a monthly basis. So you take that process and you turn it into a policy. There's a way to then you can have a standard monthly report on your salt output on your portfolio of sites, which that portfolio is going to be in different locations. It's going to have different effects that are going to have them, whether it's lake effect, whether it's sun, shade, all of those things. Condition of the paved surface is another important one. And that kind of gives you a policy that at the end of the year, you should have some kind of a final seasonal report on the total amount of salt or ice melt product applied by the month and the season. kind of, again, able to compare those benchmark numbers with prior months, prior years, so that you can look at continuous improvement. So those are just a couple examples of the policies and processes that are in that sustainable salt use guideline. Again, encourage you to download those and utilize them however you would like. Um, it was watching yesterday's presentation, and this was there was the concept of the current salt supply that's out there. Many areas of the country, including Canada as well, are in a salt shortage, and really that's kind of getting product, sodium chloride from mine to applicator. It's a slow, tedious process. It's not done quickly. And so one of the things that, with SIMA, one of our concerns again is the private contractor for slip and fall liability. And we developed a document that's free for members that is a number of called advanced contract clauses. And there's a portion in that list of clauses that cover a number of different topics. One of them has to do with when there is a minimal amount of salt supply. What's a way to protect yourself and your company when there are either government mandated regulations or there's other supply factors that don't allow you access to usual available salt or deicers. And so here's just some wording that we've recommend people to add to those clauses in those contracts, because there could be a time that it's happening now where it's the end of January, and I've heard stories of people that have run out of access to salt, and we've got a good 6 weeks of winter weather ahead of us. So and the weather patterns look like there's going to be some more events. So this is just a sample. Your clause could look different than this, but that's just a way to kind of protect you from some liability that can happen when you don't have proper access to ice melt materials. So that was it. I know that kind of a tight timeline. Just wanted to talk about just some general concepts there, and then wanted to then turn it over to Turk, because Turk's going to get into a little more, certainly more in depth on contracts, contract clauses, things that he practices in his business. So, Turk, go ahead.
Martin, if you will, spin the slides for me, please. Thank you. What I really focused on was three main topics, and it goes without saying 10 minutes is a lot, is a very short window to shove a lot of this information in. So the three main takeaways that I wanted to be able to provide to folks that are on this webinar, my presumption is that you're either property managers, facility managers, even municipal public works folks that are involved with snow and ice management, board of directors for multifamily communities. And the three big takeaways that I had to boil this down to was pre-qualifications, how to ensure that you're getting the correct folks, you're attracting the correct service providers to work on your sites. Primary contract structures, the elements and all the glossary of terms that should be in them. In that entire section really points to what Martin has provided us through SIMA. So I highly encourage you to grab those downloads that Allison had sent out, and how to implement smart salting for your property. Obviously, you've been on these webinars throughout the week. The desire, or at least the presumption here, is that you want to do the right things in terms of protecting your property, protecting the water streams, the aquifers, minimizing liability, because there is utilizing liquids, and smart salting doesn't mean less translation unsafe conditions. That's definitely not the case. In fact, just the reverse. So Martin, if you would. The pre-qualification, it first starts with your request for a proposal. So again, presuming that everybody on the call is in charge of procuring or finding or recruiting or hiring and managing folks that are involved with snow and ice management services, the RFP really is where it starts. These are the first two items that you see there. A CSP is a certified snow professional. And our recommendation to our clients and prospects when we help them write an RFP is ensure that you're inviting contractors, a CSP, with a CSP on staff who is directly in charge of snow and ice services for your geographic area. The reason I say for your geographic area is because some larger nationwide companies, coast to coast, may be able to check that box and say, yep, we have a CSP, but well, he's located in New Jersey or she's located up in Ontario, Canada. Well, that doesn't necessarily help you as a property manager in suburban Chicago, Wisconsin, or elsewhere. The next designation is an advanced snow manager. And these are really the folks that are making the calls in the middle of the night as to what to use, what product to use at what time of day, how to approach a storm. Are we clearing it? Are we anti-icing it ahead of the storm? And then also a prerequisite for contractors that have Salt Smart certified certification within their company. That language there, Salt Smart certified, is the Illinois group. Obviously, small Wisconsin's Salt Wise is in Wisconsin, but these groups are scattered throughout and growing. So I highly encourage that you find the right group that's pertinent to your area. And please be aware of the corporate boilerplate templates. There's nothing worse than having a property manager send out all of their RFPs and finding out that half the things don't pertain to their site in particular. Martin? So starting with or next up, the contract structures, there's the two predominant ones that are probably most familiar is per season and per visits. Per season, sometimes known as seasonal or lump sum, all in kind of thing. It's for predictable costs and predictable service events. It includes things such as the frequency of snowfall. Here's what we get over the last 15 years within our area. This is what we're including up to this cap to service, to plow and de-ice. We recommend excluding things that are not predictable, such as anti-icing. We keep those, we anti-ice, we love anti-icing, we know how effective it is, but we keep that outside of the per season because there's so many variables that dictate when it will be effective and when it won't. Moisture, surface temp, the type of snow coming in. We have a whole validator chart that goes through when is and when is not a good time to anti-ice. And then the unpredictable things are the more obvious, like freezing rain events, ice storms, blowing and drifting. We have a property that blows and drifts off the east side roof, and all the docks are covered. We could be out there every day of the week, all winter. So that's something that's not predictable. And so that's when we encourage a per hour unit rate, or also commonly referred to as time and material. The per visits, we recommend and we only provide our clients, unless it's a requirement of the RFP, is up to a 4-inch snowfall. So we see things like give us a price for a 4 to 6 and a 6 to 8 and an 8 to 10 and an 18 to 20-inch event. The reality is are you truly, as the client or as the recipient of that service, going to allow 18 inches of snowfall to accumulate before you see your service provider? You're not. And for what we recommend doing is 2 to 4-inch increments. We'll give you a price for a less than 2. We'll give you a price for that 2 to 4-inch increment. And then after 4 inches, we're coming out to at a maximum of 4-inch to allow for safe entry and exit of the property. Mark, elements to include within, and again, this information is all within the SIMA procurement recommendations. Avoid uncontrollable language, such as all areas clear by 6 a.m. What I'm reading between the lines when I see that is, you mean you've been burned, that your contractor has been a no-show for 2 hours after the snow stopped. If that's what you're looking for, then say that. Because all areas clear by 6 a.m. means that I have to put a skid steer, a payloader, or a laborer on every last square inch of your property when a 5:59 snowfall ends. And when it comes to snow and ice, language and liability becomes very, very critical. So avoid those kinds of unrealistic, uncontrollable timestamps within there. Identify in the scope of work who is making the calls. Put the earnest on your service provider to come out and monitor and automatically perform the services that you're expecting them to do. You don't want to arrive at a building or wake up at an HOA to walk outside and have a lineup of neighbors saying, there's 6 inches of snow and no one's here. What's going on? Like, when are they coming? We try to minimize the upon request. Again, reading between the lines, we see often where upon request of the board director to de-ice after the fact. I think what you're asking for, or what you're saying, is please don't take advantage of us. And again, that's when I would encourage you to be on a per season with all of those predictable services included. Upon request means We don't have crews sitting on standby mode waiting for the phone to ring with all of this iron and capital waiting to go out when your call comes in. You by default wind up end of the list, and you wind up paying a premium for that. We've had multiple instances where our crews are done at 5 a.m. in the morning, and then we get the 9 a.m. phone call, typically to a homeowners association where, hey, it is pretty icy. Why don't you come out here and de-ice? It's going to be about 2 hours, which is not our favorite. And ensuring that you have a site engineering plan clearly identifying all of these areas. Martin? Glossary of terms is critical. You don't mean snow removal, is my guess. Snow removal is loading the snow into a vehicle or relocating it on site. What you mean is snow clearing. Language matters. Zero tolerance, unrealistic term, called out specifically in the SIMA term glossary of terms. What you mean is all winter events or less than or equal to 1 inch plus. Salting, I don't know how that became a verb, but it did. And what you mean is anti-ice or de-ice applications. Again, language matters and resources are available to you there at SIMA.org. Martin? Third and last but not least is how to implement this now. So you need to start immediately. And the reason I encourage that is because you're in the middle of winter in most of our areas. You're able to look outside and identify, hey, has this been a good season or have we had a lot of hiccups with our service provider? And are those hiccups related to, well, I didn't know we were supposed to call you. What happens when all the vehicles leave the property and you were only able to plow the main lanes? Like, are you guys not just automatically coming back for that? Like, if that's been a repeat issue, make sure it's probably from a lack of clarity in your level of service and scope of work. So I would highly encourage you to look at these resources that Martin provided, use them as a grading sheet, if you will, as the encyclopedia of how to write a snow and ice service agreement, and give yourself a grade. Also rate your existing service provider. It doesn't mean that your existing service provider isn't performing or you need to go out and get a new one because, well, they don't do X, Y, and Z of what we've been encouraging all week. It means that you have an entire year to talk with your existing service provider if they're doing the best they can, but maybe they're not aware of these resources. They're not aware of the things that they should be looking at, such as implementing liquids and so on. Start identifying, do they have proof of certification and designation members on their team, and share this information with them. It doesn't mean that you're saying goodbye to them and you're finding somebody else. You could be bringing them along to grow together in a true partnership. And then the biggest thing is getting your team on board to get some buy-in. The biggest perception problem that we have with encouraging liquids, and I'm not going to go into all the science of how the liquids work in that, but they do in fact work significantly better. You've been using brine all along because rock salt in dry granular format needs moisture to turn into brine. So in essence, your properties have already been receiving brine when you de-ice. When you hear a contractor tell you, well, it's just too cold for the salt to work, what they really mean is there's no moisture in the air for that salt to work. So putting it down in brine format, we don't have the delay of waiting for it to go into brine solution. But for your engineers, for day porters, for board of directors who are considering this, give them right now Amazon.com, get them a 1 gallon sprayer, call your service provider. They'll be able to provide you or find for you some brine solution, which is salt water. It's nothing more magical than salt water. There's all kinds of additives and things that make a lot of sense to use. But have your engineers, have your day porters take this home with them, have them use it at the property, have them in that icy clubhouse area that always glazes over because the gutters are clogged. Start spraying that and start to get a lot of buy-in there. And Martin, the last slide, please. Couple of quick tips at the end here. Talk with your existing service provider and let them know what your goals are. You can obtain LEED certification for your properties, sustainability. There's also, that I won't get into, Martin can speak much more educated on this, about mandates coming down from local municipalities requiring sustainable salting and proof of. Another tip, talk with your insurance provider. What an awesome thing and how crazy it is that we require pesticide licenses for folks spraying herbicide on our properties, or you take your taxes into a certified accountant, right? But yet one of the most litigious things and one of the most risk management items of your property is snow and ice management. So anybody with a truck and plow, come on down. Your insurance provider might be blown away by the fact that you're even considering that. And definitely nudge them and say, hey, so if I can get these folks that are unbiased, they're certified through SIMA, they're CSPs, they're ASMs, they're salt conscious in our marketplace. Is there any kind of discount for my liability rates? And then local municipalities will love the conversation. The right folks will love the conversation. It's happening in other markets where all of the storm drains are identified with inventory ID tags, and there's salameters that are down the storm drains. And that is for how much salt is your retail center, your office building, your industrial park, your HOA dumping down this municipal drains on its way to the aquifers and the water basins and water reserves. So they would be it might be hard pressed to get immediate tax savings, but they would be very, very keen on giving you resources and supplies that maybe that we haven't spoken about this week so far. Um, that's 10 minutes worth of how to write a contract. 12 minutes, sorry.
Amazing. All right. Well, I'm going to end screen share then. We've got a few minutes here for questions, and we do have a couple questions that have come through already into the chat. So I'll just jump right in here. The first one is, do you recommend having triggers in the contract at all? For example, 2-inch trigger. These seem problematic, especially in mixed precipitation events.
I'll take that one for sure. Absolutely. You must have them in there. 2-inch is, again, we're down to one contract that has a 2-inch trigger. Everybody else is, I don't want to talk to you at 2 a.m. in the morning. You guys are up, you're monitoring the weather patterns, you come out and do it. Again, that 2-inch, we even had an RFP that came in with a 3-inch trigger. And I said, we're not even sending, this is ridiculous, because inevitably what's going to happen is a 1/2 inch falls on Monday, a 1-inch falls on Tuesday. By Friday, another 1/4 inch falls. The board is calling you saying, where are you guys? Come on out. Well, first off, 2 inches didn't fall in one accumulation. And you handcuffed me because everybody has walked over and compacted. And if you heard about the benefits of anti-icing earlier this week, it's all about preventing that bond. So now I need to come out there with a jackhammer because running my plow across your compacted driveway, you're going to be horrified. You're going to say we didn't salt enough, we didn't plow enough. Short of a jackhammer, there's not much more I can do, or worse, excessively salt your property to try to get you back down to black pavement. So yes, triggers are critical so that there's no ambiguity of who comes when. Autopilot as much as possible. Avoid the upon requests.
Thanks, Dirk. All right, this one maybe is for Martin. What kind of mandates for winter maintenance professionals are coming from municipalities?
Oh, mandates. Yeah, I'm not sure of anything that's truly like a mandate coming from municipalities. Maybe there are ones that I guess I have heard of ones like local watershed areas, kind of go this that do want that have impacts on runoff into lakes and streams. Do want to have their anyone doing snow and ice work to have some training, whether it's again in Wisconsin Salt Wise. Canada has training on this or whatever they kind of get it from, at least knowledgeable on that. But right now it's in a localized manner. Different basically kind of lake districts or watershed districts may have something that they encourage that. The other part of it too, like on a bigger scale, is obviously, Allison, you and I have worked on this. You worked on this extensively. Is the legislation that kind of is equivalent to the New Hampshire Green Snow Pro, where again it's not mandated, it's voluntary, But the benefits of getting voluntary certification and training are significant because of the liability protection that is added once you do undergo that training and the verification of the amount of salt that you apply annually. The New Hampshire Green Snow Pro has that as a requirement that you report what your your um uh, your total application is after a season. And right now, there's several states that either have had legislation that's largely replicated with New Hampshire, like Wisconsin, or there is actually some states right now that have active legislation. Two that I can think of right away is Vermont and Pennsylvania. They're kind of, I would say, they're kind of in a legislative holding pattern right now, which often happens. But they could, and I think it's good to be aware of what is upcoming in your state or even a local area in that regard.
Yeah, I would say I know Pennsylvania, they were actually going to have an event on Monday of this week, kind of kicking off Winter Salt Week at the state capitol, and do some water testing and kind of more awareness education for legislators. I think they got pushed back to March. So if you're from Pennsylvania and you are in around the capital area, I would encourage you to check that out. I'll try to throw a link in here. Otherwise, I think the Stroud Center is part of one of the organizers of that event. Because yeah, from our experience, Martin and I have both gone to the Capitol many, many times. Legislators need to hear from you. They need to hear from their constituents that this is an issue that's kind of worth their time, that they should be focused on addressing. Yeah. So Martin, I know you might need to pop off if
I do.
yeah, to your next meeting,
Thanks.
but
And
thank you.
reach out to me if they have any questions or want to discuss afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Martin. And we do have a request here for slides. So Turk, I think you guys shared your slides with me. If it's okay with you guys, I'll just put it up as like a PDF on the
Absolutely.
website. Sweet.
Sure.
All right. Another question for you. Somebody, I think from Whitewater, Wisconsin. Who do you think uses more salt, contractors or cities and villages?
That's a loaded question by who's on the call. It is a little, again, reading between the lines. It's very difficult to be in servicing a parking lot the correct way, and then watch the state trucks go down and just bounce and scatter all the way down. If you look at the lane, there was actually a study done on this exact question, and surprisingly, it is the private contractors. When you look at an aerial view look at your main thoroughway, your main highway that goes through your service area, and then calculate that, just do a quick Google measurement of how much hardscape surface is done by private contractors. Private contractor, while municipalities are not always setting the example as great as they could be, we are seeing a lot more of the lines, the anti-ice pencil tips before the storm, which is awesome because that's getting awareness out there. There's even been newsreels on it. But I think when you look at an aerial view in a more populated area, such as a suburban, suburbs of a main city, not out in the country, not out in the mountains, you're going to be amazed at how much more hardscape, let's call it, opportunity for damage there is by excessive or incorrectly salting. Acres of blacktop, thousands of square feet of parking deck structures, and parking decks have cold under, cold on top, and liquids do work on parking structures, but the knee-jerk reaction is more salt, more salt, more salt. So I think the private contractor has much more responsibility under their belt just based upon the square that's added together versus the municipalities.
And the contractors are much more open to risk, right, with those lawsuits. So
That again
I
is
mean,
the
I think
knee-jerk reaction
that's what drives, right?
Yeah.
That over salting. And I'd say that kind of like per unit area, right? Like per acre, who are going to try to convert application rates per acre to per lane mile. Yeah, we are seeing contractors put more salt down, but I'd say again, Wisconsin, the data that I see is that, our counties are the biggest users. But there's so much variability county to county, like you said, Turk, kind of like looking at, are we in a suburban area? Are we in a more rural part of the state, right? Where there are lower service expectations. So there's a lot of variables kind of at play there, that influence that. And unfortunately, salt is not regulated. So unfortunately, right? So we
Right.
don't really have good numbers. There's a lot of guesstimates about
Yeah.
how much people are putting down. Even the people
Our
who put it down don't always track it really well.
the public works are really trying. It's great to see, because they are trying to set the example, as they should, because they're on display every snow event and they got a hard job ahead of them. But yeah, I think the private contractor has the ability to do greater good or more damage, unfortunately, at 2 a.m. in the morning over 14 acres worth of blacktop.
All right. Well, those are the questions that I see right now that came in. If some more come in, yeah, let me just double check. I will let you know, Turk, and reach out. But thank you so much. This was excellent, and I personally plan on using some snippets of your presentation again.
You got it.
So
Please do.
yeah,
Spread the word.
thank you so much, and look forward to next time we connect in person.
Got it. Thanks for letting me participate.